About a year ago, I finished what I believe to be the quintessential volume on the life of Albert Einstein. It's written by Walter Isaacson. It's a volume that's about this thick, and it's quite an investment of time and money, but I consider it well worth it. The most touching part of the book for me was at the end. Albert Einstein is living the last few years of his life peacefully in Princeton, New Jersey, teaching at Princeton University. Also in Princeton, New Jersey, is a young lady, an 8-year-old girl by the name of Adelaide Deron. And she was having trouble with her math homework. And she heard that there was a wise professor who lived not too far from her that happened to be pretty good at math. So she walked down to his house at 112 Mercer Street and knocked on the front door. And there she was greeted by the professor with a large, unruly mane of gray hair. And he asked what she wanted. She said, "I need some help on my math, and by the way, I brought a box of my mother's fudge with me." Albert Einstein has a weakness for sweets. And so he invited her in, and the two sat down and worked on her math homework together. And when Adelaide Deron's parents found out, they were horrified, and they went over to Einstein's house and apologized profusely. He said, "Do not forbid her from coming, because I learned more from her than she will ever learn from me." I love that story for a couple of reasons. Number one, the idea that grandeur can be grounded. I want you to think about that for just a minute. He was a Nobel Peace Prize winning professor, and yet he was willing to help an 8-year-old girl with her math studies. But even more than that, the thing I like most about that story is, and I hope you would agree with me, that there are few things more beautiful than a mind that truly craves to learn. And I'm not only talking about Albert Einstein, I'm also talking about Adelaide Deron, a desire to learn. So Monday morning, I'll take my kids to school for the first time in the Tulsa metro area, as you will start school here. And I'll have a conversation with them that I've had several times before. In fact, I know they will answer the question even as I ask it. I will say to my kids, "Kids, you know what the word school means?" And they'll say, "Yes, Dad, we know what it means." And I'll tell them anyway. I'll say, "Well, it's a Latin word. It's schola." And before it meant scholar, the word school meant free time. And my kids, and I'll tell them, I say, "You have free time to learn as much as you want to learn everything you want to learn." And my kids, being good pastor's kids, will groan at me. Pastor's kids. I also had several important conversations before traveling here to the Chicagoland area. Teachers and administrators who I know and who I trust. I had a conversation with a friend of mine named Denise. She is a vice principal at one of our larger schools in the Tulsa metro area. And I talked to her about starting school again this fall, and she said, "I actually have an internal clock that ticks toward August 1st. I can feel it coming." And when August 1st hits, I ask myself a couple of questions. I ask myself the question, can I do this again? Have you talked to Denise as well? And she said, "And sometimes I groan just a bit." But not only do I ask myself, can I do this again, I ask myself another question. She said, because I feel like, as an administrator, I feel like a mama pig with 8 feeders and 10 piglets. See, in Oklahoma, we must talk to one another in agricultural metaphors. That's the only way we can understand y'all. She said, "I feel like a mama piglet with 8 feeders and 10 pigs. And not only do I say, can I do this again, but do I really want to do this again?" And sometimes I groan. What I want to accomplish in our few minutes together today is I just come offering you a few simple reminders. I've discovered in my own life that the greatest change that happens with me isn't when I come upon a revolutionary thought. It's when I'm reminded of something that I used to do in the past but need to do again. Or something that I put off practicing that I need to start doing now. And believe it or not, I think there are a lot of similarities between my occupation as a pastor and your occupation as an educator. We both live in very people-intensive environments, don't we? There are people around us all the time. But not only do we live with people, we also live in a cycle. You go from quarter to quarter, from semester to semester, from school year to school year. Likewise, I live from Sunday to Sunday and season to season. And if it seems like the work is never done, it's because it never is. We all work with people and we live in this cycle. So I offer you today, maybe not a revolutionary idea, but just a couple of very simple reminders as you turn the page and you start this new school year. Here's the first reminder. This year, your greatest challenge will be your greatest reward. Students, your greatest challenge will also be your greatest reward, and that is the students that will find their way into your buildings and into your classroom on Monday morning. Now, not only do I admire educators, I married one. My wife is a secondary English teacher, and I remember us moving to Fort Worth, and she worked for Fort Worth Independent School District, 23 years old, straight out of college. And as she began teaching, she met a young basketball player in her English class who had already failed the class once and was back for a second go. And because he was one of the best players on the team, there was an immense amount of pressure put on my 23-year-old wife. And by the way, she still looks 23 years old today. I've been told to tell you that. There was an immense amount of pressure put on her by administrators and coaches just letting it pass. And she wouldn't, and she couldn't. That's the kind of woman that I married. At the end of that semester, after a lot of heartache and heartbreak, that young man walked the stage and graduated. And he came down off the platform and he hugged my wife and said, "Thank you, Miss Spoo, for making me do what I needed to do, and now I will go play basketball in college." Your greatest challenge will also be your greatest reward, and that is the students that come your way. Now, this is further complicated, because while students should be everything that you concentrate on, you and I both know there are so many people to please, right? And I work in a nonprofit organization, and you work in a school district, and so there are so many different contingencies that require our time and our attention. For me, I have board members I have to please. I have members I want to keep satisfied. I have guests I want to attract. If you ever go to Yellowstone National Park, you're going to see a grizzly bear. Stay away from it. You should see the grizzly bear. It's the strongest animal in the Western Hemisphere outside the Kodiak bear and the bison. Now, the grizzly bear will often feed on the trash that we leave behind. And the only other animal in Yellowstone that will dare to come near that grizzly bear and eat alongside it is a skunk. Now, the grizzly bear can liquidate that skunk with one swipe of its paw, but the bear learned a long time ago, it's just not worth it. I wonder who's going to raise a stink for you this year. Who's it going to be? Whoever it is, it's just not worth it. You stay focused and you concentrate on those students, because while they will be your greatest challenge, they will also be your greatest reward. Not only is it tough sometimes to concentrate on students, at times because of who they are, it's very difficult to care for students. I want to know how many of you in here, by the show of hands, how many of you work directly or by indirect, you have contact with 8th graders? Let me see your hands. May God have mercy on your soul. And every age is difficult, but my daughter's going into the 9th grade, and so I've had this recent experience of being the parent of an 8th grader, and all the angst and anxiety and danger and drama that goes along with that. Did I say may God have mercy on your soul? And sometimes, because of who they are, it's very difficult to care for students. I had another conversation with a friend of mine. His name is George. George literally saved my life one time. I'll let that be another story for another day. But George is a retired superintendent for one of the smaller school districts in the Tulsa area. And I asked him to just write me a little piece. As a retired superintendent, what could he tell you? And he said this. To me, it's obvious that educators could do a better job if we had better students coming to school, taught at home, to behave themselves, to obey authoritative figures, to be eager to learn, to take responsibility for themselves. However, the fact remains that parents and grandparents responsible for these kids are sending us the best kids they have. If they had better kids at home, they'd be sending them to us. Sometimes there's wisdom in the obvious things, right? Classroom teaching has never been an easy road to travel, and today that road is filled with more potential problems than anyone could ever imagine. In the meantime, however, it is what it is, and I like George's line. He said, we accept the odds and we do the job. Accept the odds and do the job. And I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else I talk about today, I would ask you to remember this one idea. Most of the students who will come into your class this semester will feel like that they carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And many of them do. And your challenge is to care for them, to accept the odds, and to do the job. Those kids who are your greatest challenge will also be your greatest reward. The trouble is sometimes that reward is deferred. You're not going to see the results until years and years later. But I'm living testimony of the fact that I had teachers who concentrated on me and cared for me. And I remember their names. Miss Sparks was my kindergarten teacher. She taught me my colors, and she cared for me. Miss Jenkins was my 5th grade English teacher. She taught me grammar, and she cared for me. Mr. Sanders, who died the year after I had him from cancer, Mr. Sanders taught me the periodic table, and he cared for me. Mrs. Maddox, who is my first teacher in business management in my undergraduate work, and the reason I chose business management as a major, she taught me organizations, and she cared for me. And Calvin Miller, who is my mentor and my friend, he taught me systematic theology. But he was the only professor in my graduate studies who had ever invited me over to his house for a meal. He cared for me. And do you realize what happens if you make a difference in a student's life? You achieve a modicum of immortality. They will remember you. They will be your greatest challenge. They will also be your greatest reward. The next reminder I give you, I want to take students and talk about them for a while. Enough of them, we don't have to deal with them until Monday. Let's take them and put them over here. I'll talk about students more in a minute. For just a moment now, I want to talk about you. With this idea and this reminder, your greatest asset is also your greatest obstacle. Your greatest asset is your greatest obstacle, and yes, I am talking about you. You are your greatest asset. Wayne Cordiero is a pastor who works in Hawaii. How fair is that? He got Hawaii and I got Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain. Wayne Cordiero says that 85% of what you do in any given day, anyone can do, whether that's writing a letter, making an email, cooking a meal, 85% of what you do in any given day, anybody can do. The next 10% of what you do in any given day, anyone can do with a little bit of training. I could probably go to school and learn to do what you do. You can go to school and learn to do what I do. And so that leaves 5%. And Wayne Cordiero says that last 5% is uniquely you. That last 5%, no one else in this room and no one else on the planet can do that. As you step into the classroom this fall, you are your greatest asset, and you cannot be ignorant about what your unique contribution is. What is it? Where do you really excel? What do you have to offer?